Straight talk from Israel. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Welcome to the Israel Unplugged show. This is Josh Wander. This is the debut show, and we are so excited to be here today. And we're glad that you're joining with us because we have some exciting things for you. First of all, we're going to go into my background. We're going to talk a little bit about how I got to this show today, from childhood until this very day here in Jerusalem, this sunny day in Jerusalem. And then we're going to introduce our co-host, who is Rabbi Moshe Lichtman, and he's going to tell a little bit about himself and about his background and what he's doing. And finally, we are going to have a discussion. We're going to have a discussion about what this show is all about. And when we say this, what this show is all about, we're talking about unadulterated facts of where we're holding in the redemptive process. What does that mean? You're going to find out. The redemptive process involves the whole idea of the unfolding redemption, the geula that's happening today in Israel, and aliyah, what is involved in that redemptive process, and maybe a critical aspect of their redemptive process is the kibbutz galiot, the returning of the exiles, the ingathering of the exiles. That's what we're involved in today. We're going to discuss it in length about the ingathering of the exiles, about the redemptive process with my co-host, Rabbi Moshe Lichtman, and we're going to have a very exciting time. In addition to that, this is a live show, so you are able to call into the show at will. Pick up the phone. The numbers are on the screen. Call in, ask your questions. We'd love to have a discussion, a debate. If you agree, if you disagree, whatever it is, we're willing to have that discussion. That's why it's called Israel Unplugged, because we're going to have a discussion in which it's going to be no gloves. We're going to be talking about sensitive subjects which may upset some people. So if you have children in the house, just be aware that these subjects are things that have to do with Eretz Israel, the return of the exiles, and it might not be comfortable to just quote Rabbi Meir Kahana. He wrote a book called Uncomfortable Questions for Comfortable Jews. And I think that pretty much says everything that needs to be said about this show. We're going to be having uncomfortable questions for comfortable Jews. So those Jews that are around the world and in exile now listening to us today, they should brace themselves, sit down in their chair, and get ready for an exciting ride on Israel Unplugged with Josh Wander and Rabbi Moshe Lichtman.
Always challenging the status quo. Hello, I'm Rod Bryant on Beyond the Matrix here at IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. I want to encourage you to listen each week, every Wednesday at the same time, for an amazing show that will challenge you, inform you, and inspire. News, views, and wisdom for the nations here on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. Don't forget, Beyond the Matrix every week, Wednesday, here on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com.
Welcome back to Israel Unplugged with Josh Wander. As this is our debut show, I figured that this would be a great opportunity for me to introduce myself to you, to listeners, and to get to know one another. So let me tell you a little bit about my background. It's a short segment, so I'm not sure I'm going to get it all in, but we'll try our best. I was born in McKeesport, Pennsylvania. McKeesport, for those that have never heard of it, is right outside of Pittsburgh. I grew up there. My family, Orthodox family, had a business there known as Wander Sales. They sold appliances and electronics around the tri-state area, and it was a nice life. Growing up in the 70s, I was there until the age of 12. I was in that area. I went to two schools. One was called Hillel Academy. It was more of a Zionist flavor of school. And then I also went to a Lubavitch, a Chabad yeshiva there, known as Yeshivas Achai Temimim. When I was 12 years old, which this may sound unusual to some listeners, but when I was 12 years old, I actually left home and I went away to study in a yeshiva in a far-off city. I went and I dormed in Baltimore, Maryland, where I studied high school in what is known as Ner Yisrael Rabbinical College. I spent most of my high school there in Baltimore. And then I had a little bit of an incident, let's say. I had a time that I was rebelling, as many teenagers do. In my rebellious stage, some people rebel to become less religious. I decided to rebel and become what I believed was more religious. And I started looking around and tried to find what fit me, where I fit. And I looked at different Hasidic groups. And I wound up going to a Hasidic yeshiva in the Brooklyn neighborhood of Borough Park in New York. It was a yeshiva run by the Hasidic sect of Bobov. The then Bobov Rebbe, may rest in peace, was very, very kind and brought me in. And I had an amazing year in Bobov studying and being really able to experience things which I believe no one else would be able to experience without being in the inside. It's a very insular community. And without being on the inside, it's really hard to describe and experience all the incredible parts of being in Hasidic life. During that time, even though I was interested in and felt that that was my calling to be involved in this Hasidic sect, I still had a what is known as a derech halimud, a certain way of study that I was taught from a child. And it was not the Hasidic way to study that way. And it drew me away actually from the Hasidic sect. And I started to, escape. I started to leaving the Hasidic sect during the day and running off to the top of Manhattan to Yeshiva University, where I went and studied in the class of Rabbi Herschel Schechter, who is to this day my Rebbe. During that time, I was trying, although I enjoyed the Hasidic sect and I enjoyed the learning and I was having a good time, I still felt there was something lacking. And I don't want to, for those people that are, I'm sure there's people from New York that are listening, I don't take it offense from this, but being what New Yorkers call an out-of-towner, I wasn't used to life in New York, and it definitely is not something that I felt comfortable with. And I was trying to get away. I figured that there's got to be something else, and I kept searching. And I grew up in a Zionist family, and I always wanted to go to Eretz Israel. I always thought that Israel was a place that I would eventually make it to, although I never made it there yet. My Babi, my grandmother, may she rest in peace, whenever a grandchild was bar or bat mitzvah, the present that she would give them all was a ticket to Israel. This is way before birthright. We were always encouraged to go visit and to study and to live in Israel. That was always an ideal that I was brought up with. And the opportunity arose during that period of time. There was someone that approached me and said, there is a great yeshiva, there's a great a place to study in Israel. Why don't you go check it out? And that's what I did. I decided to get on a plane and fly across the world to this unknown place called Israel. Now, I had a very strange idea of what Israel was at the time. Growing up as a child, I had what I guess I would call it a skewed idea of what Israel was, even geographically. To me, Israel was this mystic sort of fairy tale sort of place. And geographically, I was always looked at, when I was a kid, I was always enthralled by globes. I would look around at a globe of the earth, and I would look around and I would see that there was giant places like the United States and Canada and Russia and China. And then I would look for Israel and I would find this little dot on the globe. And I would say, this place is tiny. It's got to be, the size of maybe Pittsburgh, maybe even smaller. I mean, how big could this country be if it's just a dot on the globe? So I had this skewed idea that Israel was really a tiny little, perhaps a couple blocks long country. And I got here, and at the time, I didn't really know anyone. And I always said, since I was a child, that when I get to Israel for the first time, I'm going to go straight to the Kotel, to the Western Wall. And when I told people that, they laughed at me and they said, yeah, everybody says, that's they're going to be their first destination, but nobody actually gets off the plane and goes straight to the Kotel, goes straight to the Western Wall. Well, that's what I did. I actually took my bags and I went straight from the airport to the Western Wall. And I figured that I was going to meet up with some friends of mine that I knew were studying here in the city of Jerusalem. And again, I thought that Jerusalem, all of Israel is only a couple blocks long, so Jerusalem's got to be very, very small. If I just stand in front of the Western Wall and wait, I'm sure that one of my friends that I know will walk by and I'll bump into them. Again, I had no idea how big this country was. And I waited with all my suitcases right in front of the Western Wall. I could not understand for the life of me where all my friends were that day, that they didn't show up at the Western Wall. Anyways, to make a long story short, I think we're going to have to continue in the next segment. But I eventually got into a yeshiva here. I started studying, and it was an amazing, amazing experience, which changed my life, absolutely changed my life. And eventually, I was studying here. I went into yeshiva, like I said, and I got my bachelor's in Talmudic law from the yeshiva here. And I eventually decided to join the army. I did it through Hesder, which is a joint program of army and yeshiva service. I did both of those. And that was an amazing, amazing experience. I spent during my army service almost a year in Lebanon as a liaison between the Southern Lebanese Army and the IDF. Amazing experience. And after I got out, I started, this was the time when Oslo, basically the whole Oslo Accord started. And I started being very involved politically with what was going on, opposing the Oslo Accords. And I became very close or very involved with a movement at the time, a grassroots movement called Zo Artseinu that was led by Moshe Feiglin. Another one of the national leaders, his name was Rabbi Benny Alon. And I became very close with Rabbi Alon, Zichrono Livracha. And after he basically, after the Oslo Accords, he became a member of Knesset, and he brought me in as an advisor to the Moledet faction of the Knesset. These are all stories that I'm going to have to get into later in the show. But that led into me getting a job eventually with the Jerusalem Post. I was the online editor for the Jerusalem Post for a number of years. Eventually, I got married, and I had a number of children here, 3 to be exact, which is ironic because I have 6 children today. 3 of them we had here in Jerusalem. And then we went back to the States to finish my education. I went back to do my master's and start my PhD in Pittsburgh. And when we did that, we had 3 more children. So ironically, the 3 older children that were born here in Jerusalem, their Hebrew is relatively poor. But my 3 younger children that were born in America, they came here, and within no time at all, they were completely acclimated. They were completely fluent. And now Hebrew is their mother tongue. So basically, we had a great time going from Israel to back to the States, studying, doing my studies. I was involved in politics there as well. I was involved with I was an elected official. Eventually, I ran for mayor of the city of Jerusalem. Mayor of Jerusalem. Maybe that'll happen someday. Mayor of the city of Pittsburgh. I'm a little bit confused here. Yes, I was the Republican nominee for the mayor of the city of Pittsburgh, and that was an amazing experience as well. I eventually came back to Israel about 6 years ago, and I moved to the Mount of Olives. That's a story as well, how we got here. But we live here in an amazing community on the Mount of Olives, one of 5 thriving Jewish communities in Jerusalem on the Mount of Olives. And we live in the largest with about 1,000 Jews, and it's thriving. It's just incredible. And I look out my window every day, and I look at the Temple Mount. The Temple Mount is a view I see when I look out my window in the morning. And I think to myself, Moshe Rabbeinu, what he would have done to just take one step into the land of Israel. And I somehow have merited to be able to not only live in Israel, not only to live in Jerusalem, but to be able to be right above the Temple Mount. We feel so privileged and to live in such a special place in such a special time. And there's so much more to discuss. Like I said, it's like, for me, it's like taking the whole book of War and Peace and wrapping into one cartoon block to discuss all the things about, but I'm sure throughout the show, if you're enjoying this, you'll continue coming back and you'll learn more about me. But as the next segment wraps around, we're going to have my co-host. Now, my co-host is Rabbi Moshe Lichtman, and he is an amazing individual of his own. And he is going to be introduced, and he's going to tell a little bit about his background and what brought him here and what he's up to. And we really look forward to interacting with you, because remember that this is a live show. So you that you're listening to us in New York or anywhere in the world are able to call in, and you're able to have a dialogue with us about whatever we're discussing. We're going to be discussing exciting things like the Geula, the redemption, and Aliyah, and the Kibbutz Galiot, the ingathering of the exiles. And with that, I will conclude this segment, and we look forward to soon seeing you on the next segment with Rabbi Moshe Lichtman.
Shalom, everybody. Making a difference often takes just one moment and one person at a time. I am Orly Benny Davis, your show host on Israel News Talk Radios from Jerusalem with love. You'll be hearing people talking about politics, religion, social issues, and making a better tomorrow. Join me, Orly Benny Davis, for God and Country. From Jerusalem with love.
Wednesdays on Israel News Talk Radio.
Welcome back to Israel Unplugged. This is Josh Wander, and during this segment, I get to introduce my co-host, which I'm very excited about. That's Rabbi Moshe Lichtman. Moshe was born and raised in Elizabeth, New Jersey. He studied in several yeshivot in Israel, including Beit Midrash LeTorah, the Grus Kollel Shalavim, and the Meretz Kollel in Mevaseret Zion. He received his rabbinic ordination, his smicha, from the chief rabbinate of Israel, and from Rabbeinu Yitzchak Elchanan Theological Seminary of Yeshiva University. He also holds a master's in science in Jewish education from Yeshiva University's Azrieli Institute. And Rabbi Lichtman made Aliyah in 1991. He taught in several post-high school programs in Israel ever since. These include the Mevaseret institutions Be'er Miriam, Yesodei HaTorah, Torah Shraga, and Lev HaTorah. He is best known for his landmark translations of Eim Habanim Smecha. I'm sure we're going to have the opportunity to speak about that a lot. An Angel Among Men, a biography of Rav Kook, A Question of Redemption, and Rise from the Dust. And for his highly popular original works, Eretz Yisrael and the Parsha, and A Drop in the Ocean. He currently resides in Beit Shemesh with his wife and his 8 children. Welcome on the show, Rabbi Lichtman.
Thank you, Josh. It's good to be here. We hope that this is going to continue, and we will have more and more listeners as we go on. Okay, so now it's my turn to tell a little bit about myself, although you already read the bio from my book. But that's the short version. I want to focus on how I became such a big Zionist, such a big lover of Eretz Yisrael, because most of the books that I've written or translated are about that topic. And the question is, how did that happen? Josh, you mentioned how you grew up in a Zionistic family. My parents were definitely Zionistic, but it didn't really have any ramification in the home. I didn't grow up with this idea of we all have to live in Israel. In fact, I always tell the story about how my older brother, he had gone to Israel to study for 1, 2, 3 years. And he decided one day that he wants to move to Israel, and I was still in high school. And I remember hearing when I heard that my brother wanted to move to Israel, I remember thinking that he fell off the moon, that there was something absolutely wrong with him. Why would anyone in their right mind want to move somewhere else, especially to this foreign country? So yes, we were technically Zionistic, but it wasn't really an issue that we discussed. And the school I went to was certainly not Zionistic, but not anti, but just it wasn't an issue. It was not an issue. I went to Israel for my post-high school year, BMT, as you mentioned there, Beit Midrash LeTorah, where many, many people went in those days. It was the most popular yeshiva, Beit Midrash LeTorah. And, the first month month and a half, still a lot of my friends were really getting into Israel, were really starting to get bitten, as they say, by the Aliyah bug and by the Zionistic bug, because BMT was a very Zionistic school, but didn't do anything to me. I was still, as American can be, and, had no intention whatsoever to make Aliyah. Then the event that literally changed my life. A lot of people, I'm not so sure that many people can point to a moment that literally changed their lives. It's usually a slow process. For me, it was literally a minute. What happened was our school took us on a tiyul, and we went to a place called the Museum of the Potential Holocaust. I don't think it still exists, but it was somewhere, I think, in the Old City, if I'm not mistaken, around there. And basically what they did was they wanted to show that, there's a lot of anti-Semitism in America, all these white supremacy groups, these anti-Semitic Ku Klux Klan, which is also anti-black, obviously, but, they don't love Jews. And all these news clippings and these videos of all the anti-Semitism going on in America. Now, before I get to the main point of what changed my life, that is one thing I have to say. Growing up, I did feel anti-Semitism, not obviously in the way that we usually speak about it in Europe in the late 1800s and, obviously in the beginning of the 20th century, obviously not that. But, I was called names and I was spat upon and I was, pushed down. And it was a very uncomfortable and unpleasant feeling, knowing that you're an outsider, that people don't like you, and for no real good reason, and having that fear. So it was, deep down in me, this fear about anti-Semitism. But again, I had no intention of leaving in America. That's where I was going to live. There's no question about it. So getting back to the Museum of the Potential Holocaust, after showing us all of these clippings and videos, etc., there was a woman who was leading the group, and she said, "So tell me, what is the solution?" And as if I was being, guided by divine, inspiration, I raised my hand. Again, up until that moment, there was nothing. I was not going to make Aliyah up until that moment. And then I raised my hand as if HaKadosh Baruch Hu was taking my hand, and I said, we all have to make Aliyah. That was it. It was like so obvious to me that is not, that America or really anywhere else in the world is not where we belong. It's not where the Jewish people belong. And from that moment on, literally, I never turned back, never looked back. Aliyah, Eretz Yisrael became my focus in life, became the most important thing to me. Now, I want to make one thing very clear. Even though for me personally, the turning point was because of the fear of anti-Semitism, but that's not what I try to give over. Although I think that it has to be stated that, people have to wake up and understand that Jews don't belong in the diaspora. We do not belong anywhere but in Eretz Yisrael. And if for no other reason than the non-Jews don't like us. And eventually, as all exiles ended in destruction and in tragedy, I hope it won't happen, but according to history, it's going to happen everywhere we go. So, but I don't emphasize that. I don't focus on that. I focus on the positives about Eretz Yisrael being the place where the Jewish people belong, which we'll have a lot of time to talk about by my various books. And I talk about the sources in the Torah and in Chazal, in the writings of the rabbis, that indicate that we really belong in Eretz Yisrael from a Torah perspective. And that's really what I've dedicated my life to ever since that moment. I did go back after that year of Israel. I did go back for 2 years to study in Yeshiva University to get my degree. And then I came back to Israel, stayed for another 4 years learning in Yeshiva, in Grus, in Shalvim, and a few other places. Eventually went back to America for just 2 years to meet my wife, Baruch Hashem. She was the first girl I went out with when I came back to America, and we came back within 2 years, and we've been here ever since. As you said in my introduction, Baruch Hashem, 8 children have been born here. All my children are born in Eretz Yisrael, and I've been trying to teach Torah, and especially the Torah of Eretz Yisrael, the importance of Eretz Yisrael, to the American students who come here for the year. I go around every year, except for this year because of Corona, but I go around to the different yeshivot, and I speak at the different yeshivot and seminaries about the importance of living in Israel, and I offer my books for sale. And Baruch Hashem, I think I've had somewhat of an influence on people through my speeches or through my writings. And through my teaching, and that's really what I want to do. That's what I'm here for, to make the Jewish people in the diaspora realize that this is where we belong. We belong in Eretz Yisrael, and especially now, things are going on that clearly indicate that we are living in very special times, and we are approaching the end of the galut, the final stages of the galut, and we already have started the redemptive process, the geula, which is I think what we're going to speak about, Josh and I together, finally, in the next segment, which is coming up very soon. That's what we're going to do in about a minute or so, and until then, maybe, Josh and I will just give a little bit of a taste of what we're going to be speaking about in the next segment. So, Josh, you want to?
So one of the guests has written that's nice, but one has to make a living. What about jobs? And I know that's one of the big questions I get when I speak about Aliyah. Yes, that's all nice and nice and dandy, but what about the jobs? What about the parnasa? And my quick answer on in a nutshell is that it says that there are 3 keys that are held by Kadosh Baruch Hu, by God, and those keys are not given to any messengers. This is what the Talmud says. And one of those is parnasa, one of those is a livelihood. So I believe that if God can give you a livelihood in Chutz La'aretz, for sure He can give you a livelihood in a place like Eretz Yisrael, where his eyes are looking, the Torah says, from the beginning of the year until the end of the year, always on Eretz Yisrael. We have to be realistic, but we don't have to worry. And with that, we're going to go on. Hopefully you'll join us for the next segment. We're going to continue the conversation. Thank you very much.
You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
This is Shai Bentako, and each week I'll be webcasting to you from Judea, origin of the word Jew, a people besieged and beleaguered in every generation. Nazi Germany's but a memory, but in its place the world invented the phantom Palestinians as this generation's internationally authorized Jew killers. Tune in for a different slant on life in Israel, Phantom Nation, every Monday.
Hi, I'm Rabbi David Aaron. The soul basics are the most profound, the most essential, and yet often the most neglected in our education. Join me for Soul Talk on Israel's News Talk Radio and discover the secrets to love, spiritual growth, and personal power.
This is Josh Wander. Welcome back to the debut show of Israel Unplugged. This is the final segment, and we have a lot to talk about in a short time that we have before we conclude. So I always tell people, if you spoke to someone a mere 70 years ago and you suggested that soon there would be a kibbutz galius, an ingathering of the exiles with millions of Jews back in Eretz Israel, a binyan Yerushalayim, a rebuilding of Jerusalem with a bustling city of almost 1 million residents. They would have called you insane. Today we are living with these prophecies unfolding before our eyes, and most people are completely unaware of it. That's what the Vilna Gaon says on the verse, V'yaker Yosef es echav v'hem lo hikiruhu, that Joseph recognized his brothers, but they didn't recognize him. He says that in the times of the final redemption, as it's happening, most people are going to be completely oblivious to it. And that's what we're seeing today. We were living in the era of the Geula, and most people are completely oblivious to it. For the first time in 2,000 years, we have dozens of Kohanim living in and around the old city of Jerusalem with the temple garments, the Bigdei Kuna inside their closets, ready to do the temple service. We have dozens of Kohanim that study Kodshim in order to instruct them. We have rebuilt all of the temple vessels except for the one that cannot be rebuilt, which is, of course, the Ark of the Covenant, which is put into hiding 30 years before the destruction of the first temple. And for those that need to know where that's at, we know where that's at. We have refounded the ancient dye of Tchelit. We're in the process of rebreeding the Paraduma, the red heifer. We're light years ahead of where we were just a few years ago. Most people just are unaware of this process. And that's something that I think if more people were understood and were aware of this process, they would have a completely different perspective on living here in Eretz Yisrael, because as we'll discuss, we have in my house, Baruch Hashem, we were able to host dozens and dozens of seminary girls every Shabbos, and they would come to us and we would discuss these ideas. These American seminary girls, we would discuss these ideas with them. And I always told them that I have a concept with that, which I have coined the MMM, the magical Mashiach moment. Inevitably, if you grew up in a yeshiva or a Beis Yaakov in America, you were taught this concept of the MMM, that Mashiach is going to appear out of the blue and the Beis Hamikdash is going to fall out of the sky and everybody's going to be transported al kanfei nesharim, on the wings of eagles, back to Eretz Yisrael. I believe that is completely inconsistent with the way that Chazal, our sages, saw any previous redemption or the future redemptions. We understand that it's kima, it's a slow process. It's not something that happens in a magical moment. Rabbi Lichtman, you wanted to say something to the question about jobs.
Yeah, okay. We'll just quickly finish up that, and then we'll go back to your introduction of beautiful about the redemption that we're going through. I just wanted to point out that there's no question about it. I don't want to whitewash it. Parnasa is a very important thing, but we have to remember that there is no mitzvah in the Torah to be rich. If you're talking about just making ends meet, I think most people today, certainly more than any other time in history, can make it in Eretz Yisrael. Yes, they will take a pay cut from their jobs in America, probably. But okay, for something that's so special and a mitzvah so great and a time period that we're living in so great, I think it's worth it to give up some of our creature comforts. It's funny that I just mentioned this Dvar Torah at my Shabbos table this past week in Parashat Mas'eh, where the pasuk says, "Tzav b'nei Yisrael v'amarta lihem ki atem ba'im el haaretz Canaan." In other words, leading up to talking about the land of Israel, it says Tzav. And the Midrash brings two opinions. One opinion says that tzav usually means ziruz, a lashon of excitement or getting someone zealousness, doing something with alacrity. And another opinion says that no, the word tzav always means chisaron kis, that there's going to be some lack of money, meaning you're going to lose some of your money because of that mitzvah. And however, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who was the second opinion, says, but there's one exception to that rule. There's one tzav in the Torah where it does not mean chisaron kis. It does not mean you're going to lose money, and that is the tzav of our parsha. Tzav b'nei Yisrael v'amarta lehem ki atem ba'im el haaretz Canaan. Because in the long run, a Jew will not lose out from coming to Eretz Yisrael. He might have a harder time, but in the long run, look what happened in the Holocaust. Look at all the millions and billions of dollars worth of Jewish property was stolen from the Jews who spent generations building it up in Poland. But you know what? in the long run, there will be no chisaron kis, no lack of parnasa if a Jew comes and lives in Eretz Yisrael. Okay, let's get back to the geula question. So if I can comment on what you said, that there's all these processes happening, and people just don't recognize it. So there's a vort that I love telling over that I heard from one of my Rabbeim, who heard it from the Nazir of Yerushalayim, one of Rav Kook's greatest students, Rav David Cohen. He was known as the Nazir because he really took upon himself the Nazirite halachot. And he says, we say in davening 3 times a day at least, may our eyes see your return to Zion, Hashem, in mercy. So most people, if you ask them what that means, they'll say, we're praying that HaKadosh Baruch Hu should one day give us the zchus to see the geula, to be there when the geula happens. But the Nazir said, no, that's not what it means. It means let our eyes see what's happening right in front of them. Because there is no question that the geula is happening. There's no question that God is returning his Shekhinah, his divine presence to Eretz Yisrael. Because we know that God goes to Galut. He goes into exile with the Jewish people. That means if Jewish people are returning, that means God, to a certain degree, is also returning. So there's no question that God is returning to Eretz Yisrael. The only question is, will your eyes see it? V'techezena einenu means, we hope, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that you don't blind us with all the peripherals, with all the seeming problems and negatives about the geula process, which we could discuss why they have to be there, but we shouldn't be blinded by them. But we should see what is happening in front of our very eyes and recognize it for what it is.
Amazing. Did you grow up with this concept that's sort of like a fairy tale concept, that we are supposed to do the best that we can while we're in the States or wherever we are in the world, and we just have to wait? It's something that I always say, that it's brought down in the Talmud that there are certain questions that are going to be asked of a person after they pass away. And one of those questions is famously, "Ha'in tzapita Yeshua," did you anticipate the redemption? And I always tell people, that was the question that I'm sure was asked for thousands of years while the Jews were in exile. And imagine if a Jew was sitting in some sort of shtetl in Europe, and what else could he do? He could sit and he can say the Psalms, he could say Tehillim, he can pray, he can daven for the redemption, but what else could he do? But I really believe in my heart of hearts that today the question has changed, and it's no longer in tzapita Yeshua, it's in pa'alta Yeshua. Did you do something to advance the redemptive process? Today we don't have to just sit back and pray. We actually can do physical, concrete actions in order to make it happen.
100%, and I think that I agree with you. But I think that is the tzipiyah Yeshua today. Just davening is not true tzipiyah Yeshua. Is not truly anticipating the redemption. Because if someone really truly anticipated it, so the moment that the Jewish people got control over their homeland after 2,000 years of galut, they would have been on the next plane to come to Israel, right? That's true tzipiyah. Right? That really truly shows that you really anticipate the redemption. Because if you remain in the galut when it's possible to come back, so then it's really more lip service. It's really more, do you really, really believe that? Unfortunately not, because if you did, you'd be on the next plane.
The Jews say around the world, Rabbi Meir Kahana used to always say that those Jews around the world, that twice a year after the Passover Seder, at the end of the Passover Seder, and after the prayers of Yom Kippur and the Elah, they raise their arms to the heavens and they say, L'shana haba'ah b'Yerushalayim, next year we should be in Jerusalem. And he says they're lying to God. They're lying to Hashem when they say this, because they know very well that they're not interested next year in being Jerusalem. They're very, very comfortable and they're very happy in being in Borough Park and being in Toronto and being in Golders Green. And they have no anticipation whatsoever in leaving. So it's unfortunate, but that's unfortunately the case, that many people don't have that natural anticipation for what's to come. I think that we're just tipping the iceberg over here. The tip of the iceberg we're touching. There's so much more to discuss about this subject, and I hope that in future shows we're going to be touching all these different areas. There's so many areas. You've written many, many books, Moshe, about these ideas, and there's so much to discuss. I just wanted to put a plug in because it's very important. Those we on this show are talking more about the why, but there's also the how one goes about making Aliyah. Tomorrow we're going to have, if you go to our website, which is bringthemhome.org.il, or israeltorah.org, you will have tomorrow a live webinar called Navigating the Aliyah Process. You can ask your questions about Aliyah. Thank you for joining the debut show of Israel.
Thank you. See you next week.
Israel News Talk Radio's chat room. Just click the orange button at the top of the IsraelNewsTalkRadio.home page, log in as yourself or an anonymous guest, and join in on the fun. You'll meet other listeners from all over the world who listen to Israel News Talk Radio, and you can make new friends. Israel News Talk Radio's chat room. It's the closest you can get to being in the studio with us.
We love listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Where can you get the inside news on Israel? At Israel News Talk Radio, we're dedicated to sharing Israel's inside story with the world by providing our listeners with news on Israeli politics, current affairs, and Israeli Jewish culture. The Israel News Talk Radio homepage also provides you, the listener, with useful information at your fingertips, with scrolling news headlines, weather, currency exchange, Shabbat candlelighting times, and so much more. Our radio programming is always accessible and on demand. We operate absolutely free of charge for everyone, everywhere. If you love what we do, partner with us now by becoming an Israel News Talk Radio supporter. With your support, you'll be inscribed on our Israel News Talk Radio Wall of Fame. There's nothing like us in the world. Be part of something great. Israel News Talk Radio. Straight talk from Israel.
If you love Israel News Talk Radio, then you'll love our Facebook page. We keep you up to date on what's happening in Israel, plus little surprise treasures that we don't share on the radio. Go now to follow us on Facebook. Just look for the Israel News Talk Radio Facebook page, and don't forget to subscribe and follow us by clicking on the like button. We post great stuff there that you'll want to share. Israel News Talk Radio on Facebook and Israel News Radio on Twitter.
News, opinion, and more. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.